What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with an updated board breaker tier list for the new format that we are in. And I've been preparing for Nationals format for about a week now, sort of deciding what decks I want to play and seeing what's good in the meta. And so this board breaker tier list is not only to talk about what I think is good this format, but especially as we go towards, Nationals format. Of course, we have German Nationals this weekend. We just had French Nationals, and then of course the North American Nationals will be early July, and I'm preparing for that. So this tier list is for me as much as it is for you guys, talking about what board breakers I think are good. And we know a little bit more about the format now that French Nationals have happened. We've had, a couple weeks of regionals at this point, or really just one good weekend of regionals, I'd say. And yeah, some things have evolved with the meta, and I think board breakers are in a really good spot, but there are some things that I guess we should talk about that involves them. So yeah, with all that being said, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below, along with all of my other social media links. Also, I'm trying to hit 15,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy this Yu-Gi-Oh content and you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel. And without further ado, let's start tiering some board breakers. So starting off with the tiers, we have meta for cards that you might want to include in your main deck, or most definitely in your side decks, cards that are really strong in the format. We have strong options that are if you want like more board breakers, or you're looking for good side deck cards. These are cards that will find, you'll see really good success with these cards. Solid are cards like you can definitely consider, but they might be like outclassed by what's in meta and strong options, but they're still good enough where you can consider running them. Maybe they depend on what deck you're playing. They might help like certain strategies more than others. We have niche, which are cards that very specific like interactions these cards will come up more for. Maybe like they're good in certain decks in particular, but not in others. And then not this format, which are cards you probably just shouldn't consider at all. They're just not that great. Starting off, we have Alpha here. I'm gonna go ahead and rank Alpha and Panker tops. They're usually sort of the same type of card. Also, if I'm missing any board breakers on this tier list, feel free to let me know in the comments, so I can not only rank them for you guys in the comments, but I can add them to the board breaker tier list going forward. There's always a couple of cards I miss, so again, if you have any cards you want to know where I'd place them or what I think of them and they should be on the tier list, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. So talking about Alpha and Panker tops, Alpha I think is niche. Like in some decks I think this card's okay. Like certain trap decks I've liked this in because it's just a big body that can have like some good clearing power, and I've always liked it kind of versus Dragon Link in the same vein as Panker tops. Like these two cards used to be very good versus like old style Dragon Link, and dragons are pretty good right now. So Alpha and Panker tops are always sort of good into seals. I think both of these cards are pretty good into Sprite. Alpha I think is a little more niche. It's certain decks play it. Panker tops I think is either solid or strong. I think he's better than he's been in a while just because the format is less toxic than it's been in a minute, and something like Panker tops can take advantage of the fact that, Sprite's popular and this card is pretty good versus Sprite. Dragon Link's popular, where this card has always sort of succeeded as well. Like this card versus Seals and like Branded Beast especially can just get you a lot of value. This card obviously can simply pop a Rise Heart, which isn't terrible. I mean, like, think about it, if they end with like a Rise Heart Fenrir or something and you can special Panker tops, swing at the Fenrir, and they have to like a Rise Heart banish, and you can still like tribute it and out something. I don't know, that seems pretty good. So yeah, I think Panker tops might be in strong options as a good one of in the side, but I'm not so sold on him. I think like you only get 15 side deck cards, and choosing to play Panker tops can be rough. I'm gonna put him in solid. Ranking all the book cards, these are cards that I think should be ranked together. Honestly, as far as board breaking is concerned, I think they're all pretty equal as board breakers, except maybe, of course, Lunar Eclipse. This one just doesn't see that much play. There's not many decks that would run it. However, I do think Book of Moon is a tier above the others, maybe something like this. Book of Moon I really like because it is most optimal of the book cards, like going first, right? So it's a board breaker that's good going first and second, which is extremely valuable. Like that, if you're a board breaker good going first or second, you will most definitely usually find yourself in these top two tiers, because the versatility that adds and the consistency to your deck, being able to have a card that is live when you go first, when you go second, it doesn't really matter. Their cards are gonna do something. There are decks in the format that sort of play around these entirely, like Sky Striker has been picking up some popularity. It's like okay, but Kashtira is still very popular, where these cards are pretty strong board breakers. I think they're good versus Sprite going first and second. Especially like when Runic Sprite like starts Hugin, if you can like book the monster in the EMZ, I always like doing that. I'm not sure that's like always the most optimal, but it is very good. And of course going second, you can hit things like Carrot or Red, and at least get a negate out of the way. I think Book of Moon is pretty solid right now, especially with how dominant, well, not dominant, but how solid Kashtira has been. And Book of Eclipse, like, just right behind it, but I think it is less good overall than Book of Moon. And niche is where we're putting Book of Lunar Eclipse, because I feel like in decks that really want discard outlets, like this card's okay. You think of something like Burning Abyss, for example, you'd rather run this maybe. But overall, this card is usually less good. So, talking about Chalice, and I guess any other form of effect negation here. Well, I guess we have all three of these are really solid effect negation. I might be missing one. But yeah, Chalice I'm going to put in niche. I feel like only... I mean, Chalice isn't like terrible. It outs a Rise Heart like an Imperm, which is okay. So I think maybe if you're... I don't know if there's a deck you would rather play this over Imperm though. But it is not terrible for outing a Rise Heart as a card. It's good going first and second as well. I don't know. I'll put it in niche for a reason. I don't think it's so bad to put in not this format, but it's not that great. Dark Ruler I think is strong. Sprite's pretty popular, and Dark Ruler historically is good versus that. I think this is good versus the Dragon Link decks that are running around right now. It's okay versus Kashtira. I mean, you're gonna stop the Arise Heart if that's what give your decks, like, if Arise Heart is what's giving your deck trouble, then Dark Ruler's not bad versus Cash. It doesn't have too many bad matchups. It's not that great versus Labyrinth, of course, and it's not so good versus Rika. But just about every other deck, like even versus Branded, this card is okay. It's not like the best versus Branded, but I think Dark Ruler has so many good matchups, it's definitely worth siding. I've seen some people main it this format, but I think you could main it for sure. It's not a terrible card if your deck is fine running cards that aren't good going first, because you're either one card starter or you're fine sacrificing some go first to have such a powerful go second card. I think Dark Ruler is pretty good overall. Droplets, I'm going to put in solid. I think Kashtira's play rate has gone down significantly. We saw in French Nationals, they had about like a 15-ish% play rate as far as like the overall amount of decks. So you're playing Kashtira less than you used to, and that makes Droplets a lot better, because Droplets is a really solid card versus just about every other deck. It's like pretty okay versus Lab to an extent. Like you're going to hit something and maybe stop Lady from activating. It's a card that's good going first and second, so that's really good. And then there are some decks where Droplet's like really good. I think in like Melfi Sprite with the Beavers, or like Tri-Brigade Sprite being able to discard, you know, something like Nerval or Kit, or most importantly, Nimble Angler is really good. I think in Cyburst decks, this card's pretty strong because you're a one-card starter deck. I think Droplet's actually in a pretty solid spot, and I've seen some people shift towards it in main decking. Not too frequently, but I have seen some main deck Droplets. I've seen it more in side decks as well, because it beats a lot of the more rogue strategies, which there are a lot of rogue strategies this format. So I don't think Droplet's going to be super rare this format. And even though there's nothing so crazy that I feel like we need Droplet, it is just a very solid card. And the only thing it's really losing to is like D-Shifter in Flouanderies, or of course a Rise Heart, or Shifter in Kashtira in general. So I think Droplet's in a better spot than it has been in a while. Swords of Concealing, not this format. Yeah, this card's just not usually very strong compared to book cards. Especially with a Rise Heart, you know, this card just doesn't do much. Speaking of another not this format, I want to go ahead and rank Xyz Encore, because this card was only going to be very strong versus Pearly, and that's why we were like playing this card for a second. But it's like okay versus a Rise Heart as well, so that's something to note, but I don't think this is what you want to side for a Rise Heart, so I'm going to put Xyz Encore in not this format now, even though I think it was going to be pretty okay if we didn't hit Pearly on the ban list. So on to sort of, you know, since Kashtira has been around, one of the favorite sort of removal cards in the format. We have the stuff that tributes your opponent's stuff. That was a lot of the use of the word stuff, huh? And we have Sphere Mode here as well. So we have Gamma Seal, Lava Golem, Kurikara, and Sphere Mode. So Kaijus I'm going to put in meta. I think these are just very good right now. I don't think they're as good as they were last format, but I think especially if you're weak to a Rise Heart, which most decks are, Kaijus are very solid. And I think the thing about Kaijus that I really like is they're going to do something versus everything, and that's not something you can say about every card. Like Kaijus, like you look at Book, it's good versus a lot, but it struggles versus some link decks like Marincess and Sky Striker, where a Kaiju destroys them. Versus a Rise Heart, a Kaiju is very strong. It's always going to do something. versus Sword Soul being able to hit something like, if they end with the very standard Chi Baron, you can like kaiju the Chi and you get rid of a blackout and a spot negate. So a kaiju is very impactful there. It's just always going to do something, even though it's not super high impact. I think kaiju slot into side decks very easily, so I'm willing to put this here. And then I'm going to put Lava Golem 1 under that, and I'm going to put Sphere Mode 1 under that. I feel like Sphere Mode hasn't been good in a while. I feel like the last time this card was super solid, I mean, it had an argument to be made in Kashtira format. Not like we've really left Kashtira format totally, but I feel like this card was very good when the Zone Lock was popular. This card was obviously pretty popular in Tier Limit format where, you know, they were just putting up such a crazy board you almost couldn't win without a card this impactful. But I feel like not many boards are ending with 3 monsters. Like Dragon Link does it sometimes, but one of them is a seal, so it's like, how good is Sphere Mode really? Not every deck can play this because it takes your normal summon, which is the same as Lava Golem, but not only can Lava Golem be summoned more than once per turn if you happen to draw multiples, but I think it's a little more flexible because, you know, they only have to have 2 monsters. But I do think they're just less good than Kaiju, so I'm going to rank it like this. And then Kurikara, I think, is a strong option. I think it's maybe, like, the thing about Kurikara, and why I put it under a Kaiju, even though it's more impactful, is you really have to be playing a certain strategy to, like, make Kurikara good. You have to be able to bait negates. Like, you can't run Kurikara, in my opinion, in a deck like Labyrinth, even though some people have tried, because your engine isn't really going to bait negates, and then Kurikara is not going to do anything. But if you are playing a deck that can, like, play into boards a little bit with its engine, force them to use interrupts, and then you can slam a Kurikara on board, she's a very impactful card, and I think very strong, maybe especially, like, above Lava Golem, I'd say. I don't think she's as strong as last format just because, you know, there's less Kashtira, but especially, like, Live Twin Runic Sprite, the way the Live Twins work, it is very easy to Kurikara a Live Twin board, and you can have Kurikaras that are, like, above 6,000 attack potentially. It's happened to me while I was playing Live Twin Sprite. I didn't play around this card very well, and of course when you use a Live Twin, you're not only using that Live Twin, but the one that comes back from graveyard, you're also going to use instantly 2 bodies for Kurikara to remove. And then if you've used Red or Carrot, that's where it starts getting very strong. So yeah, Kurikara, very good in some matchups, so I think it's a strong option. Talking about back row hate, I think back row hate is actually very strong this format, like so good, because if you look at all the top decks, and I talked about this in a recent Marincess deck profile I did where it was actually maining Feather Duster, if you look at the top decks being Kashtira, Sprite, Labyrinth, Runic variants, so Sprite is setting things like Flex Spots, Book of Moon, Imperm, along with things like Double Cross, Smashers. I mean, Feather Duster's insane versus that. Kashtira, obviously known to set good Flex Spots. You know, Preparation, Big Bang, a lot of back row cards you want to hit. Feather Duster's amazing. Dragon Link is setting up Regained and Beast, where this card's good. Labyrinth, of course, is a back row deck, so Feather Duster's good. Like, I feel for the first time in a long time, Feather Duster is almost a mainable card. I think if you're maining Thrust, Feather Duster is mainable, but I feel like it's right on there as, like, just not mainable. It's really hard because it's not good going first, and that's a big issue, but I think it hits just about every single deck in the format. Like, even Gold Pride it hits. Marincess it's, like, not that great against, but that's not, like, super popular. But Feather Duster, honestly, is really good seeming. I almost want to put it here, but I will put it in strong options just because it's not exactly something you're going to main deck. Lightning Storm, I think, is about the same, because for back row, it's almost the same card, but it has a little more versatility. And I think Cosmic's very good as well, because this card's good going first and second. You can, like, side it going first against decks like Kashtira, hit things like Birth and Planet. It's just a really solid card, especially when Runic is in the format, and Floodgates with Labyrinth and things like that. Something I haven't really mentioned much in this tier list is Vanquish Soul, because obviously they're a quite new deck to the fray. Something like Cosmic can hit TC Boo, which is a lot of them are maining TC Boo, so I think Cosmic, all the back row hate cards, I think are actually pretty phenomenal. Outside of Twin Twister, which I'm going to say is niche, I feel like you only play this in certain decks where discarding doesn't hurt you. I feel like, you know, Phantom Knight, Burning Abyss, decks that really like, even Tri-Brigade to an extent, decks that want certain pieces in the graveyard. Twin Twister, I think, is a valuable option. I think of cards like, or decks like Virtual World as well, that might want to send a Qinglong from their hand to the grave. I think those decks can opt for Twin Twister, but otherwise I think you're just better off playing these. And then it's also niche in the sense where you would really only play this if you're already running these and you just want more back row hate. So another powerhouse, getting into, I guess, like the main board wipes. Yeah, we can talk about like main board wipes here. I guess we can consider Herald of the Abyss in that as well. Dark Hole, I think, is niche. This card sort of depends on how popular Ibli is. I think this card is usually better than Raigeki just because of Ibli. But I also don't think it's that great this format. It's not terrible. Honestly, like, you look at the decks, I mean, Dragon Link has too many negates, the Sprite has Carrot. But if you pair this with, like, another board breaker, it's pretty good. I'm going to put them both in niche, Dark Hole and Raigeki. I think these cards are not actually that terrible, but you'd only play them in certain situations, like Dark Hole, you're playing if Ibli is popular, and if it trends upwards, then I would recommend Dark Hole, and then some decks lose to these, and I think some decks can play these. Obviously, you're playing something like Dinosaur. I've seen them play Dark Hole before, because it can pop your own baby, so I don't know, I think Dark Hole is better than Raigeki, but I think they're both, like, almost playable this format. Evenly matched, I'm going to put in meta. I think this card has definitely been trending upwards recently. There's just less negates now that Super Heavy Samurai got hit, and the thing about evenly and why I'm tempted to put it in strong options is I think a big thing this format is still Kashtira, and if your problem is Arise Heart, this card doesn't out Arise Heart. So I am going to put it in strong option. I think if every deck could play it, I'd put it in meta. I might put it at the top of strong options, but I think you do have to be playing a certain deck to play evenly matched. Being like, I mean, some runic, this card is good in runic decks. It's kind of always been that way because you can like combo it with flashing fire and like freezing curses that allows you to like hit negates and then hit them with the evenly match. So there's that. But like, I think you have to be playing a deck that doesn't lose to a Rise Heart to play this card. Otherwise, you are still going to lose to a Rise Heart, which is the biggest downside of evenly. But I do think this card is a lot better than it was when Super Heavy Samurai was around. So yeah, I think evenly matched is really strong. I just also noticed that once I put evenly here, all the books lined up really nice. That's pretty satisfying. So we're gonna keep evenly right here. Ultimate Slayer, I think, is solid. I think it depends what deck you're playing for sure. But against everything that isn't Kashtira, if you're playing a deck that has the extra deck room, I actually think Ultimate Slayer is pretty good because especially in something like Labyrinth, where its engine doesn't like actually break boards, you can't play something like Dark Ruler as well because, I mean, you're going to negate the board and get to play, but then they have their full board still. Ultimate Slayer actually outs threats, and I think this card is good versus like Evil Twin stuff as well. Like being able to get rid of their twin and then draw a card off Garura because you sent Bucephalus is really good. It like outs threats, they can't respond to it with monsters, and you get value off of it. So and you can activate multiple of it a turn. I think Ultimate Slayer is just as a card is really good, but hasn't been able to see the limelight because of course we had Tier Limit format, which was too powerful for it, and then we have Kashtira Arise Heart, which is just really tough. But I do think there are some decks that can play Ultimate Slayer, and I think in those decks, Ultimate Slayer will be a very good card. Herald of the Abyss, I'm going to actually put in niche. I don't think this card's that terrible because if you're playing Thrust, this card is an okay way to get rid of Arise Heart. But even more niche than that, I think this card is fine if you're playing Gold Pride specifically. I think this card's good in Gold Pride because it pays 1500 life points. So you can like board break and get your engine started, which I think is pretty nifty. So yeah, it's niche, but it does have an application in this format, and it's overall, you know, fine for outing a Rise Heart, and it plays around Forbidden Lance. So depending on how popular Forbidden Lance is, this card could be even better. But yeah, I think Herald of the Abyss is fine in niche. Almost tempted to put it in solid, but I think, again, you really have to be playing the right deck or the right cards to make it good. And then Super Poly, I also think is niche because while it's a card that can be good going first or second, I think you have to be playing a specific deck for this card to be good. Something where you can partly like use your engine to help clear the opponent's board, like Branded or Tier Laments. I think those decks thrive off Super Poly the most, and I think those decks can find success with this card, but overall just not like that amazing. Now, for some of my favorite cards, which are like the steal your opponent's monster cards, specifically like these two. I don't play these as often, but I do really like Enemy Controller. Like, I've been playing the game for a very long time. So Enemy Controller has been a favorite card of mine since like 2011. But talking about these cards in today's format, I think Talents is pretty meta. However, I want to preface this with, I think this card is actually losing steam for me. Like right now where we are in the format, I think it's very good. but I think the format slowly has been shifting more towards board breakers for like the past week or two, especially, you know, after Super Heavy Samurai got weaker. We've needed less hand traps, so a lot of main decks I see only are playing like Ash and Imperm as far as hand traps go, and then they're playing like books or other go second cards. And that makes talents less good to me because then it's only a go second card and it's less so a go first and go second card. Now, you can also look at this card as a really good go second card that also, if you open it going first and your opponent does Ash Blossom you, it's pretty valuable. Or if your deck's weak to Bystials, I think this card gets a lot better because then there's more hand traps that can hit you. But yeah, I think this card is still worthy of being in meta, although I do think it could trend downwards. If we go more to like board breakers and this card's less good, then it will be more of a side deck card maybe for certain matchups. But yeah, I still think Talents is worth putting in meta. I think it's just too good because it's good going first and second. And then Thrust is more good for go second, so I'll put it one tier under. But I do like this card can obviously search Feather Duster, which is really good this format, like I've said. So I don't know, I really like this card. Change of Heart I think is solid. Definitely with Thrust, I think you can play these together and it's pretty good. And then Econ, I like a little bit better than Change of Heart because it's good going first and second. And like Sprite's popular, and they like to play Econ sometimes. Kashtira is popular, and they like to play Econ. So I think Econ will see a decent amount of play this format. And yeah, that is going to cover it for my board breaker tier list. Again, if I forgot something, leave it down in the comments below. But yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this tier list based off what we have to go off of. And this is what I'm kind of thinking as I'm practicing for Nats. Of course, as we get a little closer to North American Nationals and we see what happens at German Nationals, of course, some of my opinions on these cards might change, but, you know, that is to be seen in about a month from now. So, yeah, or a little less than a month, about 3 weeks. So, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.